Okay, let's get started. Actually, I was confused. I thought I was going to be the third speaker, but that's just the result of being an academic scatterhead, scatterbrain. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my own research, which is what I'm accustomed to, and then I'll try to draw some larger implications from what I think is a new strain of data-driven research that has had a transformative effect on social science, on psychology, behavioral sciences, and even on economics and finance over the past 5 to 6 years, actually. It's easy to forget that just 6 or 7 years ago, we weren't aware of Twitter, and we were all having discussions about whether MySpace was bad for kids or not. Okay, so let's get started. So one of the research projects that, pardon me, that I've been really interested in, as my background as an experimental psychologist, is it's totally obvious that individuals have mood states and that change rapidly over the course of a day or even over the course of an hour. You know, when I get up in the morning, for example, I'm pretty cranky, and then that first espresso hits my system and I start to perk up a little bit. My mood improves. I get to work, have my first meeting with a student. My mood plummets. So clearly as individuals, there's a range of individual moods that we go through quite rapidly in the course of a day. And these moods, these emotions, or reactive emotions, are very recognizable. I mean, if you look at the pictures that I'm projecting right now, most people in the world will immediately recognize these faces and recognize the emotions that they represent. Now the question then is, if this is true at the individual level, is it also true at the collective level? I mean, philosophers have been talking about the Zeitgeist, the mood that particular societies collectively go through, that are often not just exogenous but also endogenous. They emerge out of nowhere. They change the course of history. And the question then becomes can we record those kind of collective mood states for societies, countries, and even the world if we can record them for individuals, right? And it's clear they have tremendous, this is research that could have tremendous implications for politics and a variety of other topics. So social media has really fundamentally changed this type of research, and I'm projecting some data that probably is already dated. The numbers are probably just half of what they are right now. But if you look at Facebook, I often joke that if Facebook were a nation, it would be larger than the European Union and the United States combined, and it would probably have a navy and be invading oil-rich countries right now. We've got about 750 million active users. These users have lots of friends. I mean, you can't call them friends, they're just followers. An amazing amount of time spent online submitting these Facebook updates, photos, etc. And then you've got Twitter, right? 100 million active users, 50 million daily users, hundreds of millions of tweets per day. Just absolutely staggering amounts of data that is being generated by millions of people continuously. And then, of course, thinking back on this whole notion of measuring collective mood states, people immediately start to look at this kind of data, right? Because this is user-generated data. People complain, they whine, they report with their activities, et cetera. And surely from that text we could derive some sense of how people are feeling collectively. And so this is where the noble science of sentiment analysis comes into the picture, and where essentially you're trying to have computers analyze text, snippets of text, and try to perform sentiment analysis. So the computers look at a bunch of markers or features in those texts, recognize them, and then take the text as a whole and classify it as either positive or negative or rated along a number of dimensions that are relevant for sentiment or mood. So I give some examples of happy tweets. I mean, for people this is very easy, but for computers it's not trivial at all, because computers have no common sense whatsoever, and so they have to go off of pretty superficial markers in that text. For example, a happy tweet, nothing quite feels like a good shower, shave, and haircut, love it, right? Good and love, those are good words. The computer will look at that, will be armed with a database that will tell it that, yeah, people, when they say love, that actually makes them feel good, so that's a feel-good tweet, that's a positive tweet. Unhappy tweets, I mean, there's a couple here. I think my headphones are electrocuting me. We can all agree electrocution is a bad thing. computers can actually learn that, and that would be classified as a negative tweet. So I just marked those words in red and blue to make it easier. It's easy for people, not really easy. I mean, we're very bad at interpreting the mood, content, or sentiment of text ourselves, and teaching our machines to do it is even trickier. But when you have a couple of 100 million tweets per day, it actually becomes not quite as important whether you manage to get every single tweet properly rated or categorized. It becomes much more important that you can do this at a global scale. So that's exactly what people have been doing. There's been quite a number of projects like We Feel Fine, which analyzes sort of the world's mood state in real time, actually tells us, you know, whether people are hating the fact that it rains, whether women are more sensitive to rain, or etc. That's just a random example. Mood views, there's some really interesting stuff done by Mislov, like the Pulse of the Nation. I don't know whether you've seen it. You know, if you look at it, they actually have a wonderful video where you can see the United States second by second evolving in terms of its mood state, and the size of the states are actually adapt to the number of tweets that they measure. So you can see the sunrise on the East Coast, people really perking up. This is totally different from my personal experience, because that's not how what my mornings look like. But people apparently are very happy on the East Coast when the sun rises and you see the sun kind of set on the East Coast. People get a little more depressed. There's a little bit of a spark of after work drinks, I presume. And then the West Coast, where apparently the happiest people in the world are living. When the sun hits the West Coast, then you get this big burst of good feelings being expressed on Twitter. A colleague of mine, Dodd, published this really interesting paper on PLOS1 a while ago, where you can actually track the fluctuations of people's mood states in real time. You can actually see the little wiggles on the graphs. You see there, those blue and red graphs, those are weeks. So people are happier on the weekend, they get a little more depressed in the middle of the work week, etc. So you can really track. So it's like a mood ring for the planet, right? In real time, you can tell whether people are feeling particularly unhappy or sad. So to our research, of course, a couple of years ago, we were interested in the exact same thing, but what we're interested in was to actually measure that mood and see whether it correlated to something important, right? I mean, it's one thing to say that someone is feeling cranky. It's another thing to say whether they're gonna short the Dow or not. So we took a collection of tweets, about 10 million, and again, nowadays that looks like a ludicrously small data set, right? 10 million, only 10 million tweets. Right now, we're analyzing about 50 million tweets per day. But back 2 years ago, that was a giant data set. So we take those tweets, we pipe them through a tool that we developed at Indiana University that measures mood along a number of particular dimensions. One of them is calm, so people are feeling calm, whether they're alert, sure, vital, kind, happy, etc. And then we rate every single individual tweet along those dimensions. Okay, so that gives us a bunch of time series that charts the public mood along these 6 dimensions. So we can measure how calm people are, how confident they are, how happy they are, etc. And we end up with a global mood time series. What does that tell us? It tells us, for example, these are the elections, the 2008 elections. You clearly see how nervous people were just before the election, right? And that's natural, right? When the election results come in, people are feeling sure. They're feeling very energetic the day before the election. So these are people, you know, on Twitter saying, "Come on, let's go vote. Yes, we can," you know. And then the day after, they're very happy with the outcome, which means at that point in time, there were more Democrats on Twitter than Republicans, apparently. The funny thing is also that if you look at these 6 dimensions, Thanksgiving is one of those days where Americans just feel happy, probably by eating a lot of turkey, and they flatline along all other dimensions, which is, you know, they're probably passed out on the sofa after overeating really badly. So what we were interested in, well, you know, the stock market is really like a big global mood ring as well, right? So when people are feeling anxious, they might be selling their stocks. If they're feeling particularly confident, they might be buying them, and it might affect prices. You know, I still remember in the fall of 2008 how it felt to see 60% of my life savings evaporate in the span of just a couple of months. So my facial expression at the time was a mix between this guy's expression and, well, I went through the 6 stages of grief, let me put it that way. And so we figured that there might be a correlation between these 2 independent measurements of the planetary mood state, if you will. Okay, and that's what we did. And funny enough, we did found that there was a very strong correlation. And not just the correlation. This was one of those cases where my student and I had this eureka, aha, erlebnis, where we looked at these graphs, and my student said, well, there's no correlation, I'm really sorry. And I said, oh, no, that's not a good thing. It's difficult to publish null results, as they call them. And then she said, well, the funny thing is, if I shift our mood curve forward in time by 3 days, then we do have a correlation. And she said, but that's not worth anything. I said, well, hold on. That might actually be worth quite a bit, right? And so if you look at it, these graphs, this is our mood data shifted forward in time by 3 days. So this is where it's predicting, right? It's correlating because it's predicting. And wherever sort of the peaks and troughs of these curves overline, it means that when mood went down 3 days in advance, the market went down 3 days later. And when our global mood went up 3 days later, the market went up. And even though it doesn't look like much, and I've been told by the designers and artists that I've been talking to that these are very bad graphs from a visualization perspective, but the correlation is very, very strong. And you can see actually the market plummet and mood actually nearly perfectly tracking those movements, right? Of course, there's some statistics. We can actually show that statistically this relation is valid, right? Which is something we have to do. Very strongly significant results, statistically significant results. And this is something that got a lot of attention when we published this paper. Like 3 days later, it was interviewed on CNN International and Bloomberg Television because of it. But we actually used a neural network that we trained against the 3 previous days of the market and added our mood data into that, and we achieved an accuracy of 86.7%. Now, that was for a relatively short period of time, but we've been doing this for the past 2 years. Actually, I founded a startup, as you can imagine, to commercialize this. And there's quite a bit of value, but we can actually predict the market with relatively good accuracy. Okay, so that's what we've done, right? And it's gotten a lot of attention. Myself have been astonished at the power of these social media environments to actually capture information on the ground, right, where all of these users are essentially like little human sensors that report their status, which is aggregated via all of these social media environments, and then we can extract signals that effectively predict the world's financial markets. Now, this is very different from what one would expect, right? And I just recently saw a colleague of mine, Clayton Davis, who works for the Truthy Project at Indiana, say that in the last few days, this is just on Facebook, there were 50K tweets about Romney and Mitt Romney, but 5 million tweets about vote One Direction, America. And that's a band. That's some kind of a boys band, right? So that's 5 million tweets about voting for a boys band and 50,000 tweets about Romney. So a lot of people, when they look at Twitter and Facebook, they're really looking at it as some kind of a pastime for bored teenagers. But that doesn't jibe with what we've been seeing. That doesn't jibe with what we've noticed. And for example, in disaster response, the way that news about earthquakes travels around the world, and also how regimes are actually undermined by by social media chatter, if you will. And it also matches very well research that has been conducted for the past several decades, where we study collective intelligence. We're relatively simple individuals like an ant, right? When you put a lot of these individuals together and they interact with their environments and they leave pheromone traces in the environment, that they can exhibit very complex, very intelligent, adaptive behavior at the scale, not of the individual or small groups of individuals, but large groups of individuals. So when birds flock, for example, it's a tremendously adaptive, complex, and intelligent response to predators, right? But every single bird is following very simple rules, right? Don't bump into other birds and match speeds more or less and match direction. People do that too when they cross the street, right? When we go online, we leave like little breadcrumb trails that other people can follow, right? That's what recommendation systems do. So the hope here is that what these systems are really doing is hooking us all up together, where relatively simple individuals at a global scale can exhibit very complex behavior. There's actually some really interesting mathematical results in collective decision making, like the Condorcet theorem. This is yes, that date is correct. It's 1785. That essentially shows that if you bring people together that individually have only a very small probability of getting it right, but you have them vote by majority, that if you put enough of them together, you have near certainty that the group will actually achieve a correct result. Of course, the flip side of that is if you have a group of people that, on the average, is just slightly more likely to come up with the wrong answer, there's no hope, right? This might be what's happening with US elections right now. I have a population that manages to always get it wrong. Now, we're often, well, wait a few months. So we're all familiar with the wisdom of the crowd, right? Taxonomies are a very good example of what can happen when you have people perform really relatively complex tasks, and you join the results up and you achieve something like Wikipedia, which beats the Encyclopedia Britannica in terms of accuracy, or at least matches it to a degree that is just absolutely baffling and that runs against common sense. There's also prediction markets that many of you will be aware of, where you simply have people bet with their money on the outcome of a particular process, like, will Barack Obama win the election? You buy stock on the basis of that assumption, and you sell the stock. So people are just trying to make money. Every single individual here is just buying and selling stock, trying to make money. But if you look at share prices, so this is the share price of Barack Obama winning the election, it's actually highly predictive of the actual outcomes, right? Because you're forcing people to vote with their money, and then their judgments become very different than if they're just giving you their opinions. So this is really interesting stuff. We have actually done quite a bit of research on looking at what scientists read. So every single dot on these maps is a journal. And so what we've done is we collected billions of usage events from the world's libraries. So essentially we're spying on scientists. We're measuring what they read and what they read one after the other. And so we can produce these maps of how scientific results hang together, right? How they're connected from the behavior of scientists worldwide as they interact and read the scientific literature. You see these beautiful clusters appear, like these are the humanities and the social sciences. You've got medicine right here. The green ones are environmental science and biology, and then physics and chemistry form this little cluster. And these interconnections are very interesting. So again, it's baffling that these things emerge at all, right? Because if everybody has their own random super individual interest, you would expect this graph to just be random. It's not, it's highly structured. And that structure emerges really from the kind of stigmergic relationships and processes that occur online when people interact indirectly with themselves, right? I should refer here to Ronay in 1979 published this great book about the macroscope and how these systems are increasingly become as a kind of macroscope for society that allows us to view society as a whole, view all of the connections and the interconnections between individuals, networks, the economy, et cetera. And instead of zooming in on sort of pretty minor details of our social lives, we're now able to view, create these overviews that are very instructive and that might actually lead to entirely new systems of governance and science, in fact. And I should refer here to my friend and colleague, now deceased, Valentin Turchin, wrote this fantastic book about meta-system transitions. And the idea here is simply that from a simple evolutionary perspective, assuming that, that species evolve, very often what you see is the emergence of a meta level of control emerging, right? Like the move from unicellular to multicellular life is one of those emergence of a new control level on top of what used to be relatively unconnected individuals, right? And this is very tantalizing for us because what I think we're seeing, and this is my previous advisor at the University of Brussels, Francis Heiligen, who's done quite a bit of work with me on this notion of the global brain. And the idea is that we've all become neurons in a gigantic brain, right? And whenever something happens to us and we report on it on Twitter, it's like that neuron firing. It's actually reporting its state, right? It's like if someone slaps me, neurons in my skin fire and send signals to my brain where it gets integrated, right? And Francis and I, and he actually founded the Global Brain Institute that's actually looking at this phenomenon in more detail, are very interested in this notion that something like a global brain might be emerging, a new metasystem that sits on top of society as we knew it, and that leads to a higher level of adaptiveness, of fitness, of complexity, and of global intelligence. And so that's sort of the science fiction part of my talk. But I think these are very tantalizing ideas that I love to discuss over beers, and I invite us all to do that. Here's some publications. From our publications, I'm a big fan of open access publishing, so most of these all of them are available online for free. And I should also refer to the Truthy website at Indiana, at the School of Informatics in Indiana. I'm also part of this project that in real time is tracking how ideas travel through Twitter and how people are attempting to spread rumors and misinformation along Twitter, and what can be done in modeling those attempts and perhaps even to counteract them. Who knows? So I'll end here. Do we have time for questions, or that's not how it works? No? Okay. That's it.